Wise man once said, be fearful when they're greedy and be greedy when they're fearful. And right now, investors are clearly afraid. The month of September is off to a tough start, just as we anticipated it might be, and the markets actually just had one of their worst weeks in years, which is actually a great time to be an options trader. But we aren't here to be bearish, because as of today, September 8th, I'm happy to say that I'm actually feeling very bullish on the markets, and I'm optimistic about what the rest of the month has in store for the bulls with this macro catalyst in mind. So, in this video, we're going to quickly go over this upcoming macro catalyst, and actually one that's even sooner than this in the week ahead, that are making me so bullish on not just Bitcoin and the Bitcoin miners we're going to discuss today, but on the greater markets, on small caps, on a lot of the stocks that we talk about here on the channel. So we're going to talk about this, and then we're going to dive into the charts, talk about the big three, take a look at Bitcoin. Got to kick it off with Bitcoin. Can't look at Bitcoin miners without first discussing Bitcoin. Move on to my personal favorite, Riot Platforms, and then close it out with Miss Marathon Digital. But before we get into the charts, I'm proud to say that this video is once again sponsored by the very promising company that is DeFi Technologies. DeFi Technologies, or stock ticker symbol DEFTF, is a fintech company that's making it easier for traditional investors to get involved with digital assets. They just announced their Q2 earnings. The report was solid. And at the end of the video, I'm going to go over some of the highlights for you guys. So stick around if you're interested. And thank you again to DeFi Technologies for sponsoring this video. Now, the next FOMC meeting is coming up on September 17th. Jerome Powell is going to take the stand and give the very, very highly anticipated rate cut decision on the 18th. Okay? It's pretty much 100% priced in that this rate cut is coming. And it's almost inevitable that Jerome Powell and Federal Reserve will be cutting rates by at least 25 basis points. But, and before I say this, I will say that this is entirely speculative. I'm a trader, I'm not a fortune teller. But just given all of the extremely dismal and really negative economic news that we received last week, which is really the catalyst for why the markets like the S&P 500 and NASDAQ sold off, that poor economic data, the data itself, leads me to believe that Jerome Powell and the Federal Reserve will probably come in pretty hot, and actually that there is in my mind, and the betting markets agree with this, there's a pretty decent chance that they choose to cut 50 basis points or even more potentially, in which case the markets will absolutely rally. Okay? Before this, I mentioned that in the week ahead, we also have a macro catalyst that plays perfectly into this, and that is the August CPI report. Okay? The August CPI report, which is pretty much the Fed's the primary data point, the primary metric that the Federal Reserve looks at in order to determine what they're going to be saying and the tone they're going to take on at the next FOMC meeting. In this case, obviously in the week that follows the CPI release on the 11th. And just given all of, as I just alluded to, the poor economic data that we just received in the week prior, it makes sense to me that this August CPI report is probably going to come in pretty soft, which is good news for the markets, and the Fed will be happy to see that, which will encourage them to potentially cut, that 50 basis points, potentially even 75 basis points, instead of the pretty much 100% factored in 25 basis points. If the Fed chooses to not cut rates at this meeting, then the markets are going to go into the trash can, but that is incredibly unlikely, and it is, again, I think that there's a strong likelihood that they will cut by 50 basis points. Again, speculative, but I think the data does complement that idea. So that being said, again, not just bullish on Bitcoin, bullish on, Palantir. Palantir is getting added to the S&P 500. That's a little beside the point, but we bought Palantir calls. Very happy about that. There's a lot of other stocks I'm bullish on right now, and I'm just excited to see what the rest of the month, and again, October, November, December, have in store for primarily growth assets, for risk assets like small caps and a lot of the names I just dropped just now. Okay, so Bitcoin is looking good. I opened up the video by taking a look at the Bitcoin Fear and Greed Index. Again, you guys, Warren Buffett, buy when there's blood in the water, strike when the iron's hot, whatever analogy you want to use. When people are afraid, it typically pays off, especially if you're talking about a medium to long-term time horizon, to go against the grain. Okay? Maybe you won't catch the bottom. Maybe this isn't the bottom. But as of right now, I can pretty confidently say, no, you guys, my money's where my mouth is. I actually just sold all of my put options for massive profits on Friday. Any members of the portfolio newsletter group, first link in the description, can attest to that. And as you can see here, I'm not going to scroll all the way down just out of respect for my subscribers. Call options now consume 100% of the portfolio. And again, very, very happy that we picked up those. I actually doubled my Palantir call position on Friday with some of the put options, profits from the put options that we saw because the market's absolutely tanked. Okay, so again, you guys, regardless of how bullish you may be feeling, always stay hedged. And if you're bearish, obviously stay hedged as well. But what we're seeing now is, again, bullish for all the reasons I just described. It pays to go against the grain. It pays to, again, swim up the current, whatever analogy you want to use there as well. But when they are fearful, be greedy, and that's why I chose to purchase a whole bunch of call options and actually go full on call options, go full long on top of all my common share positions on Friday. Okay? So, all of that rambling aside, technically speaking, Bitcoin is actually shaping up pretty well. Okay? I'm not going to say that this looks bullish, but I will say that as of right now, in my mind, the short term actually favors the upside. Okay, so as you can see right here, just to zoom out, just to preface this, you guys, when we look at this, it's very clear that Bitcoin is still in a macro uptrend, right? When you zoom out, Bitcoin, this is a bull market. We've been in a very, very long lull, and Bitcoin hasn't seen its last all-time high since March of this year. But it's typically the long lulls like this that are followed by a large move in one direction, which is either up or down. In this case, because we have been holding such a strong channel with, this red line right here being the line of support, I would say like just a conservative line of support or floor on this channel on the overall macro uptrend, due to the fact that this little range right here was Bitcoin's prior macro high prior to shooting to those all-time highs back in March. But I do think that we maintain this channel. I don't think it's very likely, again, unless Jerome Powell and the Federal Reserve really choose to punch the bulls in the face of their meeting. I think it's very, very unlikely that that Bitcoin breaks below this range right here from, like 50,000 to 52,000, 53K. And I do think that we ultimately make our way up in the month ahead to the line of resistance, to one of these lines of resistance. The lower one being conservative resistance. That's what I'll personally trade upon. You always want to be one step ahead of the competition, which is why I use those conservative lines of resistance, which have more touch points on them. But ultimately, I think it's very, very possible that Bitcoin climbs, 25% potentially by early October to test the absolute line of resistance on this descending channel or on this kind of, it's more of a range. Okay. So once we see that, if we break above this line, which I do think is coming in the month of October, just to be completely honest, then I think we see new all-time highs, and I think it's almost inevitable that we climb to new all-time highs. And if we do break above this line of resistance, I do think that the line of resistance on this massive, massive long-term megaphone channel are going to come into play. Ultimately, come November, December, my price target for Bitcoin is going to range just within the range of $80,000 to $90,000, $80,000 to $90,000, just to generally ballpark it. And yeah, obviously, if that happens, then Bitcoin miners like Riot Platforms and Marathon Digital are going to absolutely skyrocket. Okay, so conservatively speaking, in the shorter term, Riot Platforms, Mara, very, very discouraging. I know some of you may feel incredibly discouraged about this, but given everything that I was just saying, I am feeling pretty bullish on not just the week ahead of us, but again, on the rest of the month and into the fall winter months. Okay. So short term, I will just say that at the very least, I think Riot Platforms will be making its way up to test the line of resistance on this short term downtrend, which is very, very depressing to look at for some of you. And I do think, just to provide a little light in the short term, I do think that we climb, at least 10 to 12, 14% in the week ahead, depending upon when we test the line of resistance on this channel. But ultimately, you guys, again, I really don't want to discuss, or I don't want to focus on the short term. I want to focus on the long term. Again, maybe we get another few sessions of blood. Maybe the next, maybe in the week ahead, going into the CPI report, it's a little choppy. But when it comes to this FOMC meeting, when it comes to the latter half of this month, I'm very bullish. I do think Riot ultimately breaks above the line of resistance. I do think that Riot reclaims this kind of like long-term channel that it was the sideways range that it was in for a while, above like $9, we'll say. And I do think that once Riot breaks above $9, it's going to be a slow and steady climb up and to the right into the months ahead. October, November, December, I think will be predominantly green. And as you saw in Bitcoin right here, the reason I have these timestamps, go back to the daily candles. The reason I have these date ranges and price ranges is to remind you guys of how fast things can happen, okay? Of how high these assets can climb when they get the right catalyst, okay? Again, as you can see here, Riot, back in June of 2023, over a year ago, and this in 27 days, in less than a month, Riot over doubled in price, up 120%. Just earlier this year, you could do it right here too, parabolic up and down. But just earlier this year in February, okay, 8 days, Riot climbed almost 80%, okay? So again, if you're getting discouraged, if you're feeling down and out, just remember that there have been so many times in the past where these assets have gone absolutely bonkers in a very, very short period of time. And because I don't want to say the longer you go without a correction, the likelier, or like the longer you go without a big move to the upside, the likelier it becomes. That's almost a gambler's fallacy. But right now, with everything, with this macro catalyst primarily on the horizon, and just the seasonality of the markets, given the fact that we just corrected so significantly, I think that this is the perfect storm for Bitcoin miners, for growth assets, small caps, like I alluded to in the beginning, in the months ahead. Again, maybe we get another few choppy sessions, but ultimately, I think the months ahead are going to be very bullish. And I think money where my mouth is now is a very advantageous time to accumulate shares of whichever companies you like. If you don't like these miners, that's perfectly fine. Whatever your favorite stocks are, I personally think now, not investment advice, whatever, I think that now is a good time to be loading up on some of your favorite companies that you think will succeed in the medium to long term. Okay, so Mara, we'll just make this quick. Mara, short-term downtrend. I do think that Mara also climbs in the week ahead to test this line of resistance as well. Same thing, 12 to 14%, depending on when this, depending upon when this trend line is tested. Once if we break above this line, I do think that Mara actually has a very, very nice trajectory, and I'll probably trade Riot based upon this a little bit as well, because it's a very clean line of broken supports that I think will come into play as new resistance. Okay, so prior support becomes new resistance. If we test this, I would say this is pretty conservative, because I do think things kind of light up in the latter half of September. That by the end of October, by November 1st, I do think that Mara can make its way up to, $23-24. If Bitcoin starts going crazy, if Bitcoin breaks to, those $80,000, $90,000 levels that I was talking about earlier, then I definitely think it's possible, even likely, that Mara makes it up nearly 200% and tests the top lines of resistance on this megaphone channel, similar to Bitcoin. Okay, so that would result in a $38 to $40 Mara, again, depending upon when those trend lines are tested. All right, you guys, I'm a little sick. I apologize if this was a little all over the place, but the point is, I'm very bullish. I'm excited about what these companies have in store for them, and I'm also excited to talk to you guys about DeFi Technologies and their earnings report. Okay, so DeFi Technologies, again, very, very solid earnings report. DeFi Technologies Inc. announced Q2 2024 financial results, achieving its strongest financial quarter to date. Record revenues of 133.2 million Canadian dollars, US $98 million, and 128.2 Canadian dollars, or US $94.4 million, for the 3 and 6 months ended June 30th, 2024. Net income of, I'm just going to go by US here, of $66.5 million and $53 million for the 3 and 6 months ended on June 30th, 2024. And notable strategic developments. Okay, if DeFi Technologies generated income of $66 million in the recent quarter, then the company's PE ratio is 3. 3 is crazy. Looking ahead, DeFi Technologies projects its annualized revenues for fiscal 2024 to reach approximately $131 million, supported by ongoing AUM growth, upcoming ETP launches, and the integration of new acquisitions, which are poised to capitalize on the favorable conditions in the digital asset sector. Furthermore, DeFi continues to evaluate additional DeFi alpha trading opportunities, which, if executed, will drive revenues and net income higher. Always do your own research and make your own investment decisions, but that sounds pretty darn good to me. Thank you again to DeFi Technologies for sponsoring this video. As always, their information will be in the description of this video as well. Ticker symbol, website, go check them out. Check out their investor page. We appreciate our sponsors. It means a lot if you check them out. And I look forward to talking to you guys in the comments about all of the good stuff we discussed in this video. Don't be afraid, you guys. Be strong. The strong survive in the end. And yeah, we'll just close it out on that note. Until next time, always remember, take action, make waves. Peace.